Sandy Close, Director of Ethnic Media Services. We are honored today to have U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, Democrat, California, as our guest speaker. Formerly California's Secretary of State, he was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom on January 20th to fill the Senate seat vacated by Vice President Kamala Harris. Today, he chairs the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Security. In this special half-hour newsmaker briefing, Senator Padilla will speak about his first bill calling for the legalization of essential workers and will update us on the progress of immigration reform measures passed by the House, currently pending in the Senate. After his opening remarks, Senator Padilla will take questions moderated by Pilar Marrero. Please enter your questions in the chat box. Thanks to our interpreters for providing simultaneous interpreting in Spanish and Korean, and to our conference coordinators. I'm turning the conference over now to today's moderator, Pilar Marrero, and thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm so happy to welcome Senator Alex Padilla. Bienvenido. Good morning. It's so good to see you from your hometown of LA, where I am.
I'm home this weekend.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us, taking the time. We have a lot of ethnic media today who have a lot of questions for you, but please go ahead and make your remarks about your bill and update us on that.
Great. Well, thank you, Pilar, for the invitation to be with this beautifully diverse group of reporters. It is great to be home, and it's great to be with all of you. I think when we last spoke, it was still in the tail end of the census, and as we were gearing up for the November 2020 election, in my prior capacity as Secretary of State. But as all of you know, it's been about 86 days now that I've been serving as California's newest U.S. Senator and the first Latino to represent California in the United States Senate. I know most of you we've been working with and talking for years, but if there's any new reporters that have joined today, I just want to take a minute to share the background, which will make sense when we begin talking about my legislation and immigration more broadly. So for those of you who aren't aware, I am a proud son of immigrants. I grew up in the working class community of Pacoima, California, in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. My parents immigrated to California in the 1960s. They are from Mexico. And for 40 years, my father worked as a short order cook. For the same 40 years, my mom used to work cleaning houses. Hard work, honest work in their pursuit of the American dream. Through their hard work, we had a modest upbringing, to put it mildly, but they raised 3 children. I have an older sister who has been working in education throughout her career. My younger brother works for the Los Angeles City Council, and we grew up with the values of service to others and getting a good education. But we also saw my parents get very involved in the community. It was through their activism and community organizing that in many ways led me to public service. I saw when my parents came together with neighbors to address rising violence in the community because they needed to do what they could to keep the community safe for us. And so, proud to have their example because it's their journey and my life experience that has always both inspired and informed my public service, from my days on the Los Angeles City Council to my time in the state Senate, certainly as California Secretary of State, and now here as a United States Senator. I know full well, because I've lived it, that California's diversity is a tremendous strength. And so that's a big reason why my first bill, the first bill I've introduced as a United States Senator, sets out to honor our immigrant essential workers with action. for more than a year now, we've all been living through this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And along the way, I've seen a lot of gestures of appreciation, news stories and Facebook posts and tweets, people thanking essential workers who, despite the risk, despite the pain, continue to show up to work every day to help put food on our tables. We've been thanking healthcare workers for taking care of our loved ones. We thank the people who clean the hospitals, restaurants, homes, and offices to make sure that communities can stay healthy and that our economy continues to move, all while putting their own health and the health of their families at risk. So I believe it's time that we honor them, their work and their service with more than just our words. These frontline workers have earned a chance to become citizens of the United States, the country that they make better each and every day through their work and their contributions under these most extreme circumstances. And so, one of the things that I'm using to help make the argument amongst my colleagues and the general public is recognizing that there's more than 5 million essential workers as recognized, as defined and recognized by the federal government, more than 5 million frontline workers who are not just immigrants, but undocumented immigrants. These workers, they remind me of my own parents. As I mentioned, my father worked as a cook. My mom used to clean houses. She was a domestic worker, both job classifications that are considered essential workers today. So, dignity, respect, and a pathway to citizenship for essential workers, yes, it is personal for me, but it's also in the best interest of our nation. We're at a pivotal moment in our nation's history as we will begin to rebuild from the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So for me, COVID relief, it does not only mean addressing the health impacts of the pandemic, but also rebuilding our economy and rebuilding an economy that is much more inclusive of all populations. Granting our frontline workers a pathway to citizenship, we know is also a strategic and key way to stimulate economic recovery. And that's why this last week, together with Congressman Joaquin Castro, we sent a letter to President Biden urging him to include this piece of legislation, the pathway to citizenship for essential workers, as part of his infrastructure package. When I mentioned that it's not just personal to me, but good for our nation, consider this. A 2016 study by the Center for American Progress shows that undocumented workers contribute $4.7 trillion to the United States GDP. Undocumented immigrants contribute an estimated $11.7 billion in state and local taxes and $12 billion in Social Security revenues every year. And in addition to the financial contributions, it's a key part of addressing a workforce issue. The vast majority of our current and future workforce growth, which at less than 1% annually is very slow by historical standards, will be accounted for, will be met by immigrants and children of immigrants. And so I firmly believe we can't simply rely on hardworking people to keep our nation afloat and keep our communities safe in times of crisis, and then turn our backs on them as soon as the pandemic is over. That would just be wrong. So again, I'm proud that my first piece of legislation that I've introduced in the Senate gives our frontline workers the pathway to citizenship that they have earned and that they deserve. And more generally, as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Citizenship, and Border Safety, I know that we can no longer ignore the 11 million plus people who have been living in this country, living in the shadows, but working, paying taxes, contributing. They deserve a pathway to citizenship as well. So I'm looking forward to helping the president move forward with a comprehensive immigration reform package this Congress, possibly standalone, ideally as part of the infrastructure package. We'll entertain all options for how to get it done, but I'm looking forward to making significant progress in 2021. So I know we probably have many questions to get to, so I'll turn it back over to Pilar.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you. So, I guess the first question in the chat, but also the first question I have is related to how you pass all of this if you cannot get 10 Republicans to support you in the Senate. Mm-hmm. So we have the two pieces of legislation on immigration that were passed in the House. We have whatever, you have your essential workers bill, even if it's put inside the infrastructure bill, you would still need the 10. So you have called the filibuster a relic of Jim Crow that has been used to kill popular reforms going back to the civil rights era. How do we get rid of the filibuster? And I know you have more of your view is not necessarily the view of the president, who recently has said that he would like to reform the filibuster to what it used to be, but you really want to get rid of it entirely. So how do we do that?
Yeah, no, so look, it's two intertwined conversations. One, how do we get immigration reform passed? And that's why I say we'll entertain all options. Is it standalone? Is it part of the infrastructure package? Can we get 60 votes? Let's just start there. In the Senate, well, first of all, the first step is for legislation to be introduced. And now the big package was introduced by Senator Menendez. I've introduced the essential workers piece. And we've begun those conversations with our colleagues to see, do we have enough votes on a bipartisan basis? For Dreamers, for example, I have talked to several Republican colleagues who are supportive of protections for Dreamers and a pathway to citizenship. That's great. I've talked to colleagues about, in some cases it's essential workers broadly, in some cases it's strictly agricultural workers, mirroring the bill that's passed by the House. There's bipartisan support for that. So I know there's bipartisan support for reform. The question is, do we do it piecemeal through individual pieces of legislation with separate votes, or as a package? So that's the negotiation, the strategizing that's happening right now. I do think there's a possibility to get 60 votes for some of these reforms, but I want to have options because I want to get this done. And so, reforming or abolishing the filibuster, I think there's a lot of candidates for that. If protecting voting rights, I saw somebody reference that in the chat, advancing the climate agenda, even passing an infrastructure package. If we need to change the rules and get that done with less than 60 votes, then we open the doors for many things, including immigration reform. There's also the budget reconciliation process. One of the recent developments in the infrastructure negotiations is approval by the parliamentarian that an infrastructure package can be passed with 50+1 votes. We don't need all 60. Not ideal, not preferred. We preferred that it be done bipartisan, but our first priority is to get it done. And I think we can make a similar case for moving immigration policy through a budget reconciliation process. So we're using an all of the above approach while we're negotiating the specifics.
So there's a number of questions in the chat. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to combine some of the questions with the stuff that we need to get answers for. I apologize to my colleagues not calling on each one of you. But there's a question about the border buildup. I guess they mean it's the border buildup artificially generated by the media. Maybe they mean the numbers coming to the border. But Senator, the activists were disappointed today because President Biden just announced that he will not lift the cap on refugee admissions, which was at an all-time low of 15,000. They're also disappointed that he hasn't been fast enough in getting people's asylum application passed, accepted, pushing people back over the border. I know many of my fellow Venezuelans are complaining they're being pushed back into Mexico. Has President Biden has a big job in his hands, but has he done things fast enough for us?
The Look, I too am disappointed with the announcement from today. It was mixed news. They want to speed up the process for asylum seekers, but he didn't address the numbers of refugees that they would accommodate as he had previously committed. I know Senator Menendez has already put out a formal statement, and so I will echo his for the time being. So a couple of things that I have found important to clarify with a lot of my colleagues. You know, number one, we see the families or even the unaccompanied minors that are coming to the border. That's a different population than the 11 million plus undocumented immigrants that have been living here, working here, and we're advocating for a pathway to citizenship. Some of my Republican colleagues would easily conflate the two to use it as an excuse to not want to do anything. You know, I think it's also been helpful to remind people, look, we know that every spring there's an uptick in numbers of people coming to the border. It's a very seasonal dynamic. In some years it's a small increase, some years it's a big increase, this year it's a very big increase, but it's not a new dynamic. And the images that we're seeing of some of the detention facilities, that's also a product of the prior administration starving the agencies that are charged with, you know, processing. And so, you know, we have put more resources there, and we will continue to. I mean, the White House and Congress are willing to commit more resources if necessary, so that we add the capacity, immigration judges, facilities, et cetera, to be able to house asylum seekers more humanely and process them more quickly. But we're in that transition. It's our job to keep the administration accountable for those improvements. And just the last thing for now, hoping that they can restore the ability for asylum seekers to apply for asylum from their home countries, so they don't have to make that long, expensive, and often dangerous journey to the border to try to apply for the process. So a lot of pieces we're working on simultaneously.
Senator, I know you've been worried about the anti-Asian hate that has been happening. Cristina Oriel has a question. Cristina, would you like to ask your question really quickly, please? Can you unmute, Cristina Oriel?
Oh, yes, thank you. Hi, Senator. It's great to have you here. And thank you for always being an ally to other communities like the Asian American community. I saw that you and other senators released the statement yesterday calling for the advancement of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. I was wondering, and just to break it down to terms that our communities can understand. Can you talk about what happened this week with the bill and what are the next steps to get this passed in the Senate?
Yeah. So some Republicans are still trying to throw up procedural roadblocks to it, but I believe it will eventually pass, very likely next week. And what we're calling for, I think, is simple common sense. I mean, just broadly. We all can stand up against hate and denounce hate crimes. We've seen the uptick in hate crimes over the last several years with a lot of populations, but most recently there's been a significant uptick in hate crimes targeting the AAPI community in California and throughout the country. And so what this measure would do is designate somebody within the Department of Justice to be specifically dedicated to marshaling federal resources within and outside the Department of Justice to counter hate crimes, not just assisting in holding individuals accountable that are committing these crimes, but getting to the root causes of it. It's one of the first topics I raised with now Attorney General Garland when he was coming through for confirmation. And then more broadly, the topic of rooting out white supremacy is something that we have insisted FBI Director Wray make a priority, since the Department of Justice and the FBI have relationships with state and local law enforcement throughout the country. They have an opportunity to lead here, and we want to make that directive very clear.
Okay, I want to call on Regina Wilson. Please unmute, Regina.
Can you hear me now?
Regina.
Good.
Yes.
How are you? So good to see you, Senator. I mean, well, yeah, you're a senator now.
Yes.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you a question that probably deals with some of our ADOS. We know that a lot of the descendants of slaves have been working hard. They helped to pass legislation here in California, to look at reparations. And I know that the what was it? The House, I think last week, moved a bill to do a commission on the study of reparations. How do you plan on, balancing that conversation and actually pushing through, maybe with your colleagues, looking at reparations, even if you support it? I don't know if you support it or not, but
I do.
What would you do to help kind of push that conversation forward? I know it's a thorny conversation, but I know you're up for the challenge.
Yeah. No, look, it's for me, it's not a difficult conversation. To me, it's the morally right thing to do. And we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be able to negotiate and advance an infrastructure package and immigration reform and protect the right to vote and work on, environmental protection and, addressing historical injustices like this. I know my colleague, one of the members I find myself working very closely with is Senator Booker, who's been a leader in the Senate on this. So, just referencing the prior question, our statement released yesterday on the uptick in violence targeting the AAPI community, it was very intentional that it wasn't just the Asian senators speaking up. It was all the senators of color, at least on the Democratic side, behind this important message. And I think you can anticipate seeing the same unity on the reparations discussion.
Senator, gun violence is at an all-time high and growing. We were all shocked, I think, to see the video of the killing of Adam Toledo in Chicago. The police seemingly just killed him in cold blood and lied about it. Mm-hmm. So how do we stop this? It's clear that we haven't addressed this issue.
Yeah, well, it's a combination. I mean, you say it's there's a lot of common sense gun safety measures that have also been victims of the filibuster. So yet another reason why the filibuster at a minimum needs to be reformed. If it was up to me, would be eliminated so we can advance a lot of those common sense measures that I think have sufficient votes on the floor, just not the 60 that's required when Republicans filibuster the item. But the other half is use of force by law enforcement. And, it's shocking, it's stunning, it's, increasingly traumatic to see additional incidents have the conversation intensify as the trial in Minneapolis because of the killing of George Floyd last year is in its final stages. So we have a lot of work to do. I think there are models for reforming police departments generally, changing culture of local law enforcement, specific policies and practices that can be changed. We have a model here in Los Angeles alone. I remember when I was on the city council, I was part of negotiating and implementing the consent decree with the Department of Justice. That was a huge game changer. And let me be clear, is the Los Angeles Police Department perfect today? No. Are they much better than they were 25, 30 years ago? Yes. So, I just raised that as a model for how when the political will is there, you can commit to specific reforms that improves training, improves education of police departments, emphasizes community and police relations. And, I'm eager to continue the conversation of having a law enforcement personnel respond to a lot more 911 calls where, a police officer may not be the best person to respond to a lot of situations. And those are gaining traction in cities across the country and in Congress.
Okay, I know we're running out of time. I'm going to call on my colleague Sunita to make her question. So we end on a personal note. Sunita. Are you there, Sunita?
How did your immigrant parents respond when you told them about your appointment to the Senate?
Did you hear that? So her volume is low for some reason. How did your parents respond when you told them you got appointed to the U.S. Senate?
Pilar, as you know, we lost my mom a couple of years ago, but her spirit is still very strong in our family. So I know she's proud and smiling from up above. And it was honored to, when I was sworn in the Senate, to be holding her Bible for that ceremony. My father, I got to tell you, I could hear his pride beaming through the phone. I know he's proud. It was frustrating to not be able to go over and give him a big hug because in December, we still had not been vaccinated. We've been working very hard to keep him safe and healthy. And so, a couple of months later, once he did get a second vaccine, we were able to get together and celebrate. And look, every day I think about them and their struggle and their sacrifice for my brother, my sister, and I try to honor that because I know it is not unique to my family. Our family's journey, as I said earlier, is just symbolic of the work and the pursuit of the American dream for millions of families in California and throughout the country. And that just continues to inspire me each and every day.
Finally, Senator, I'm going to take some of the question by Araceli from La Opinión. She says, what can ordinary people do in order to support this effort to fix our immigration broken system? And Sandy has a question. Are we in a race against time in terms of public opinion on immigration reform?
Yeah. I don't know if we're in a race against time on immigration reform when it comes to public opinion. I do think we're in a little bit of a race against time because of the political calendar. If I've learned anything over the last several cycles, the closer you get to the next election, the more reluctant, particularly Republican members are to want to stretch a little bit beyond their comfort zones on supporting immigration reform. So, I'm hoping we get as much done as we can, as soon as we can, before we get too close to the 2022 election cycle.
Senator, we really appreciate you being with us. Please come back to talk to ethnic media often.
I promise.
Okay, I'm going to keep that video so I can share it to you. No, I know you will. Sandy, you want to close?
Yes, I want to thank you, and greedy as I am as a journalist, ask you one final question. What surprised you most being a senator? What didn't you expect about the work?
What has surprised me the most? I think the one thing I'm still adjusting to, and it's a good thing, is the volume, the magnitude of the work, the pace of it. I've been busy before in my life, but nothing compares to what the last few months have been like. I think part of it is the nature of the job itself. Of course, every issue is a big issue, but also the uniqueness of the time that I've made this transition and that I'm working in. It's not just the United States Senate. We're still in the midst of a once-in-a-century global health pandemic. We're still in the wake of the deadly insurrection of January 6th. To think that within my first few weeks as a senator, I participated in the impeachment trial and was part of the crafting and passage of the American Rescue Plan, one of the biggest acts by Congress since the New Deal. It's been a lot, but it's a reminder of the ARP is a reminder of the power of government to do good when the will is there and the will is aligned. So we'll try to make similar types of big, bold progress in a number of issue areas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Senador.
Thank you, everybody. Please continue to stay safe.